All right, we are live.
All right. Okay, great. Well, welcome back, everyone. My name is Ryan Long with the Federal Transit Administration. I will be leading the next discussion on public transportation transit coordination. As you know, this is a review of the transportation planning process. That process involves many stakeholders, state officials, local officials, transit agencies, other modes of transportation. So I feel like we wanted to talk a little bit in particular on public transportation and its role in development of the planning products that the MPO undertakes. So my first question, and I do see that there are several folks from GRTC, so that's great. I'm so glad they are on, and I think DRPT as well. So this is good. So hopefully, feel free anyone to to jump in here. So my first question is, as I submitted, was how is the long range plan? And I know you're currently in the throes of an update. How is LRTP and the TIP cooperatively developed with the region's transit providers? And do the transit agencies have a seat at the decision-making table?
Yeah, I guess I can start. This is Chet.
Okay,
so the answer is yes, there is cooperative development with the region's transit providers. GRTC is obviously the big transit provider. They have a role on many of our advisory committees, including our TAC, and our I believe they attend our CTAC meetings as well, and obviously have a role with the policy board as well as the new Central Virginia Transportation Authority. So on the GRTC side, they have actively been involved in the development of Connect RVA 2045, our long range plan update. They serve on our advisory committee, and we have multiple opportunities, sometimes daily, to communicate and coordinate with our partners at GRTC to make sure that that everybody's on the same page and making plans that complement each other. I do want to raise that in addition to GRTC, one of the roles that our staff has taken on is essentially the creation of a mobility coordinator. Ken Lance on our staff has really taken the lead in working with some on-demand transit providers, some of the smaller providers from our jurisdictions, that community service type of providers that have not been, I think, officially part of our process, but he's done a great job to make sure that everyone understands what's going on and how they can be engaged to provide feedback on the plans that are being developed. I think that I can probably keep talking, but you might want to hear from the transit providers themselves, or even the RPT, in terms of if they feel they've been involved.
Sure, this is Adrienne Torres at GRTC. I mean, Chet pretty much covered everything. We're very, very involved in all of the different groups, as well as the committees. Any subgroups were also incorporated as well. So yeah, very, very involved.
I guess I feel a little bit of an obligation to chime in a bit to answer this question. So from DRPT's perspective, I know that we tried to facilitate a relationship between GRTC and any of our transit providers and their MPOs. So in this case with Richmond, whether it's the development of their transit development plan that we require all of our transit agencies to develop, which is now also for GRTC and now is transit strategic plan, as well as any other corridor studies or plans. There's always been coordination with the TPO staff and vice versa. So that should be reflected very well in their long range planning process. I believe you also mentioned about the TIP. And so with the process with GRTC, when they have any type of tip amendment or modifications, we have developed a process. I am actually right now their program manager as well. So it's kind of a helpful overlap between the programming and planning side. So if there are any tip amendments or modifications, we work with GRTC and our finance division to make sure that there is a consistency with what we have on our records, as well as the STIP, even before the proposed action is sent to the TPO. So there's consistency in terms of those actions as well. So I like to say that I think over the last few years, we've improved in terms of the coordination between GRTC and the TPO.
That's great. That's great. How about on the transit project selection? How does that work? For like a long range plan update, deciding kind of the priorities for the region, I should say, the transit priorities. Is that coordinated? I guess mostly GRTC has their capital budgets and so forth, but how does that translate into the decision-making process of the long-range plan ahead of those projects? Is that just something that does the state work with GRTC? I mean, is this all part of the TAC and the formulation of the long-range plan?
Yeah, I think that the project selection process in particular is fully new this time around with the long range plan. It is based on performance measures and scoring and ranking across all modes. So there are particular transit projects that score very, very well. Most do, and that's reflected in the ranking prioritization process. One of the things that we have recognized is that big transit projects are also very expensive. So as part of our project selection process is a cost benefit analysis. And so the scoring and the ranking shakes out in that regard. But I think transit projects still do score very, very well. I would ask at this point if a couple of our planners, Miles or Sulab, wanted to go into any more detail. If you'd like it, Ryan, we can certainly talk a little bit about how that scoring process works and what the measures are.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, because I'm always interested to know, how these plans how these projects kind of get selected, prioritized, especially on a long range plan. Are they kind of are they weighed against other highway projects, or is it a separate kind of process of just within itself, just transit projects get ranked and then highway projects, or are they actually all kind of together, imposed to different formats? So I was just be curious to hear.
Sure. Sulab, are you comfortable doing that? I can share a scorecard if that would help as a illustration.
Sure, I can start with it. So before we prioritize the project, we need to develop the projects, right? So for the long range transportation plan, most of the transit projects are basically capital improvement projects. Came out from the Richmond Regional Transit Vision Plan, which DRPT conducted a couple of years back. And then the follow-up of that plan, which we are calling as the Transit Vision Plan Phase 2. So there was a detailed study of the transit requirement in the Richmond region in those studies. And the studies recommended a few BRT routes, as well as the more appropriate first increment in the Richmond region's transit, that would be the enhanced transit routes. So altogether, we had, I think, 5 or 6 BRT projects, as well as 6 enhanced transit routes, as well as a couple of transit transfer stations, which GRTC are proposing. So that was our pool of transit projects in the long range transportation plan. These projects have been extensively studied, and our method of evaluating project was performance based. So it would require a lot of data for those projects to be evaluated. The projects were coded in the Richmond travel demand model, and we had a set of performance measures as seen in the screen. So looking at the federal planning factors based on FAST Act, the 10 planning factors, as well as the 7 goals from MAP 21, staff developed 5 broad goals: safety, mobility, equity, accessibility, economic development, environmental land use. And within those goals, we had project performance measures, altogether 15 performance measures. So all projects were scored and ranked based on these 15 performance measures. So we tried to make the performance measures worked for both transit as well as highway projects or rail projects or park and ride projects. Even though the comparison is not apples to apple, we try to make it in such a way that each project gets compared with each other. So the project ranking process overall wasn't based on the transportation mode. All projects were ranked based on these performance measures. So transit projects scored pretty good on safety as well as equity and accessibility, because a lot of our transit routes were providing new accessibility to the region in which transit never existed before. So they actually scored pretty high in our ranking system. And based on the discussion, we included all of our enhanced transit route. We included all the transfer stations, and we included one BRT route in the long range transportation plan, basically the capital improvement plan, capital improvement part, which includes all the sidewalks throughout the corridors, any crosswalks, transit's priority software, purchases of new bus, and things like that. The operational cost is not covered in the long range transportation plan.
Okay, this is good. Thank you. Yes, thank you. This is interesting to see.
Hey, Silva.
Mhm.
Ryan, if you don't mind, I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is this exhibit contained in the Connect RVA 2045?
Yes.
Is this where we're taking this from? I just happened to look at page 85, and I have a question on one of the figures, transit-related figures. I just want to make.
Hang on one second, Ivan. I'll try and
Sorry about that, Chet.
pull it up. No, that's okay.
I like these goals here. Just on adding while you're pulling that up. A lot of times we've seen measures that maybe might discount transit's full benefit, and certainly some of these measures and goals which are part of your LRTP goals don't do that. So I think this is good. I think it really captures sometimes transit gets like I said discounted a little bit because the
Absolutely, Ryan. I think this is. I concur with what you're saying, Ryan. It's great. It's a great slide. On this particular slide under transit, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the dollar amount. Where there's a dollar amount of 64 million, and you identify a total of 11 transit projects. But on the next page, you're saying in transit, it's 693 million in 11 projects. Is there something missing here? Or
I think, Ivan, that's a typo, and which we have corrected. So it should have been 693. Instead, I think the amount mentioned there was for park and ride, which is 64 million. So
gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. Ryan, if you don't mind, I have a question for GRTC.
Sure. Cool.
And I was wondering if GRTC can give us a summary of their leadership structure as well as the role of the owners of GRTC.
Richmond and Chesterfield County. We have a board and they hold chairs, and there's 3 and 3. So 3 from City of Richmond and 3 from Chesterfield County. As far as our leadership, we have a CEO, a CFAO, a chief of staff, and then chief development officer. And then the divisions are all split amongst that. Any other further clarification?
No, the role of the owners from a decision-making standpoint, what is their role?
We review fiduciary items as well as operational items with them.
As far as route structures, route expansions, are they involved in those types of discussions as well?
Anything that comes to level of a major change, we definitely incorporate them in that process. And that, of course, comes naturally through the Title VI process as well. But yes, they are very, very engaged. And if there's any expansion, even more so, the jurisdictions just historically have the way that our revenue stream is set up with them as far as receiving operating dollars come from their general fund. So just making sure those funds are there when we discuss expansion opportunities. The CVTA is something new for us this past year. So that has changed a little bit. The jurisdictions have actually cut their operating dollars by about 50%. So those funds have come in to kind of maintain the level of service that they had before.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ivan. Okay, so I thank you for all that discussion. I have my next question. I have is regarding transit specific plans and analysis. So just kind of wanted to touch base with MPO and see, are there any transit specific plans and analysis that are conducted by the MPO on behalf or in coordination with the transit operator? I know, or is it, the relationship's usually different, between the MPO and transit operators. Sometimes transit operators will conduct their own transit planning specific studies. I just wanted to see if the MPO maybe conducts some on their behalf or in coordination, just trying to get a sense of kind of, how the MPO and the transit agency interact in terms of, planning studies. I know I heard that at your MPO, you have a new mobility coordinator, which is great. Actually, I don't know if that maybe that new role brings on, assistance for additional transit studies and plans.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I see Adrian smiling too. I think if there's any type of coordination, we've tried all of them in the past 2 years. So yes, the TPO, Sulab mentioned. The transit vision plan. The first one was the main document was a DRPT led process. The TPO developed the follow-up, the phase 2, in coordination with GRTC and a host of other stakeholders, including local government and others, our state partners. And so in that regard, that was a TPO project. We got assistance from outside consultants to lead it, establish the stakeholder committee. So we were all at the table as that was being developed. The new CBTA has specific transit requirements, and those include some new planning efforts. So we have worked with GRTC to support them in developing an annual transit plan for CBTA purposes, as well as, and then the CBTA, I guess on a flip side, was responsible for developing a transit governance report for the General Assembly. So that was a CBTA product where GRTC provided support in some of the information provided there. And we have already started talking. Adrian, you may want to provide more detail on this about transit systems plan, transit development plan, some of the upcoming products that GRTC is getting ready to embark on, where we'll be willing partners and provide as much support as we can from the TPO side.
Sure. Yeah. And having all the groups already together with all these plans, as far as coordinating the jurisdictions, it's been great to work, I guess, with the MPO through coordination. So in addition to all the ones that Chet kind of mentioned, we of course use those as bases for when we do our plan. So whether it's TDP, next year we plan on doing the transit strategic plan for DRPT. We will of course engage the MPO throughout the process. And then some of the more CVTA related ones, we're kicking off a MicroTransit study that's coming this fall, which will incorporate all of the jurisdictions. CVTA, specifically the Regional Public Transportation Plan, requires us to work with the MPO to coordinate with the jurisdictions for approval. And then of course, all the ones they mentioned earlier, just making sure our capital is incorporated. So that's also part of the TDP, TSP, and all those other plans as well.
Yeah, the MicroTransit study underway. Is that right?
Yes, the MicroTransit study, we kicked it off with our consultants at the beginning of the month. So that one will actually be coordinated with MPO as well as CVTA, but that is CVTA funded transit priority.
Okay, good. So it's like maybe some of the transit development, so did it change names? Is that why the transit development plans are now called transit plans? Is that right? Okay.
That is correct.
Okay. There are two things. I'm like, well, is there another? Okay.
So we still have transit development plans for our smaller urban as well as our more rural transit agencies. But for our large urban agencies, we have now a little bit of a different requirement. So that's the transit strategic plan.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry for the confusion.
No, it's okay. No, this is good. So it's multiple levels there. So this is, but yeah, that's kind of the way it works out sometimes. Yeah, obviously the state has their statewide requirements for that transit development / strategic plan, and GRTC is conducting their own, and MPO is leading others. So it's a multi-pronged process. Thank you. Let's see here. I did have I'm going to go back. Oh yes, the CVTA was interesting to me. So I think if I read that correctly, there was some new revenue. Is it like a dedicated transit funding? Did I read that correct? I guess it's only been 1 year, so you maybe don't have the amounts and whatnot yet. But there is, in law, I guess, is there a dedicated source of funding now? State is, I guess, I'm assuming local revenue for transit only. And I was just, if that's so, I was just curious to know, like, what type of projects and who is helping to forge those transit projects.
Sure, I can start and then turn it over to GRTC. 15% of the taxes collected go directly to GRTC to fund transit-specific improvements, and that began at two different times, but both tax streams were in the past year. So those revenues have started to accumulate, and it's exciting. Adrian mentioned that some of the local governments have scaled back their local contributions because of the existence of the CVTA funds. So we're tracking that and hoping that as more funds are accumulated, we can start to build the resource to make some big change. But Adrian, do you want to able to address any specific projects? I think is that what you were asking, Ryan?
Yeah, I thought on that slide, maybe the page you showed us earlier, maybe I read it wrong, but I thought it said that the transit funding had to go for like operations. Did I read that correctly? Maybe I just want to make sure I had that clear or not. Like, yeah, I just, no.
I think in the LRTP where he mentioned it doesn't go towards
Okay.
operations.
Okay.
He mentioned that, but the FY21 for CBTA was roughly, I think, 20.8 million for GRTC from the 15%. And the projection for the next fiscal year is about 28 million. Each year we have to get our regional public transportation plan approved. And in that, we prioritize how we're spending it. At this point in time, maintenance of service is the priority. And then we're working through those two plans I mentioned over this next fiscal year and just listing out the priority for all 9 jurisdictions and hopes to do some form of expansion per the approval of everyone in the jurisdiction as well.
So the 20 million would for expansion projects, or is that?
No, as I mentioned before, and Chet just mentioned, the jurisdictions, part of legislation was that they were allowed to cut their operating contributions to GRTC up to 50%. So they all did the 50%, Henrico County, City of Richmond, and Chesterfield. So the majority of those dollars actually went to maintenance of service. So that was equal to about $20 million plus the studies. And then next year, you're probably looking about the same 21 million. If there is any sort of variance that we can use towards expansion, we will set that aside.
Okay. No, that's good. Sorry, thank you for the clarification, Adrian. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, quick question, Adrian.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Ryan. That's okay.
So I think you had mentioned that in terms of ownership, it was 50-50, City of Richmond 50, I think Chesterfield County 50. With this introduction of the CBTA and its taxing authority, are other jurisdictions interested in becoming owners of GRTC, and what does that process look like? What does that process look like, or would look like? I think.
Yeah, Ivan, this is Chet. That's a great question, and that was one of the things that I mentioned briefly earlier. There was the CBTA was responsible for a transit governance report back to the Governor General Assembly. That was completed last month and submitted, and it does address everything you're asking about. This was a consultant-led study, and there were a number of stakeholder interviews, and there was a peer review from other metropolitan areas around the country that were in similar situations as us, to kind of see how the governance structure of some of the other transit organizations works. And there were a number of recommendations and follow-up items that came about as a part of that report. So I think there's still, it kind of set the table for future discussions, but didn't provide any definitive responses right now. So I think that between the TPO and GRTC and our local governments, we know what needs to be done next in terms of the discussions that should be had. And it's just a matter of figuring out when the best time to do that is. We have had interest. We've all heard interest from Henrico County that they would like a larger role on the board at GRTC. And I think that part of the focus that GRTC might have, if I can put words in Adrian's mouth, is that this MicroTransit study is putting a little bit more of a spotlight on the rural jurisdictions to see what their appetite is for increased participation in the work of GRTC.
Okay. Should I appreciate that. To follow up with, I have a follow-up question regarding the 50% GRTC ownership by Chesterfield County. Chesterfield County is represented on both the Richmond MPO as well as the Tri-Cities MPO. I guess is it safe to assume that the development of the transit vision plan for the Richmond urbanized area also included coordination with the Tri-Cities area?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember who was on the steering committee. Is Barb Jaycox here? Do you remember or Ron, were you on the steering committee for the transit vision plan?
For the original transit vision plan, I am not entirely certain, but for the subsequent phase 2 that we did, they were not part of
Okay.
our steering committee.
Are any expansion routes with respect to the transit vision plan reflected in the Tri-Cities long-range transportation plan? I'm trying to get at how integrated was the Tri-Cities region in the development of, or the coordination of, the most recent transit vision plan for the Richmond urbanized area that includes the Tri-City region, where 50% of the ownership is on the Tri-Cities MPO board, or GRTC is on the Tri-Cities MPO board.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I think that we had, I mean, Route 1 was a major corridor that was in the transit vision plan phase 2, but I don't believe geographically it went across into the Tri-Cities study area.
Yeah,
obviously.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I raised the question because during our last certification review of the Tri-Cities MPO, some of the public's comments were regarding GRTC and GRTC routes connecting Tri-Cities and the Richmond MPO. And that's why I thought that it would be logical to begin discussing, the transit vision plan, especially considering the fact that, half the ownership of GRTC is on the Tri-Cities MPO planning board. Well, thank you. I'm sorry, Ryan. You can go if you haven't.
No, I think all my questions have been answered. So thank you very much for all of the responses, DOP.
So,
and GRTC and MPO. I do have some follow-ups on transit performance measures, but I think I'm going to hold on that. I think we have that topic later. So,
hey Ryan, just a final follow-up with respect to, again, the 2040 Greater RVA Transit Vision Plan. And I guess I'm trying to, is that 2040 Transit Vision Plan reflected in the soon to be adopted 2045 physically constrained RVA long range financial plan? What percentage of, let me paraphrase it. What percentage of the 2040 Greater RVA Transit Vision Plan is reflected in your financial plan for the 2045 long range transportation?
What's the linkages here between?
What's the linkage? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, I would ask other staff to chime in, but I think that one of the things that we saw with the transit vision plan was what are the ultimate needs for the region going to be? And that's where we saw identification of multiple 4 to 5 BRT routes around the region. As we looked at this financially constrained LRTP update, we dialed it back a little bit, understanding that in terms of sequencing, it probably made sense to look at 15-minute frequency before we go full on BRT. Right. So some of those projects, I think everything that's in the transit vision plan can be reflected in one form or another in the long range plan, at least in the universe of projects. But we did try to be a little bit more responsible in terms of funding projections and ultimate landing spots for transit improvements, to say that we want to be realistic in terms of improving frequency before we think about redoing all the infrastructure to accommodate BRT. I would love it if we could skip that step, but I'm not sure that's the best direction to take.
Thank you, Chair. Ryan, thank you. I appreciate it.
That was a good question. Good comment. Thank you, Chet. And okay, I don't have any more questions on this section, Richard. So
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Chet. That was a
Thank you.
good discussion. The next section that we're moving on to will be covering Unified Planning Work Program, UPWP, multimodal planning, which includes freight planning and bike and pedestrian.
Yep, I got it. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, Richard,
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
sorry.
Renee, will be one moment.
Okay.
Just to follow up real quick from the last topic that I had, we're going to follow up with Richmond MPO on the self-certification question that Chet said that he's going to follow up on.
yes, thanks. And I'm going to cede the floor to Martha Heater, our Executive Director of Plan RVA, and possibly Eric Gregory to provide some background.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Richard, for letting us circle back. I just wanted to follow up on the question about the self-certification. So as you know, that self-certification is done through the approval of the TIP. And so the last approval of the 2021 to 2024 TIP was approved in 2020. And that certification really is I'll say the back end of what begins with our annual letter of agreement with VDOT and DRPT, where the Regional Commission, Plan RVA, assures that we will comply with the Title VI and other MPO requirements. And then through our monthly, quarterly, and annual reporting process, we submit reports to both the TPO and the state and federal partner agencies through our funding requests to summarize all of the activities. We actually isolate the activities around Title VI, public engagement, and environmental justice within the Unified Planning Work Program, so that we're very transparent about the monthly activities, quarterly activities, and annual activities that support our work to advance public engagement and to comply with the Title VI and other, I'll call them inclusive provisions. So that reporting process is the mechanism that we keep our stakeholders and our partner and funding agencies up to date on the activities that are occurring. And then that certification happens every 4 years, as you know, with the self-certification and the approval of the TIP. So I hope that gives a little bit more kind of clarity to our process of where it starts with the annual certification and assurances in the letter of agreement, the periodic reporting that we do, and then the self-certification every 4 years.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Martha. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Martha, you're saying that those activities are reflected in, for example, in the case of the UPWP, the performance reports that are provided to VDOT?
Yeah, so actually every month we provide a work status report to the policy board when they meet. And so that follows the flow and the organizational structure of the Unified Planning Work Program. And so each month the policy board receives a summary of activities that have occurred for that period. And then that's compiled into a quarterly report that's submitted in conjunction with the fund request to both state funding agencies. And then, of course, you probably know that VDOT has implemented now, I think within the last 2 years, an annual reporting process. And so that's a template that we complete, but that's also submitted annually to summarize the activity. So there's sort of this like mounting, each is supported by, the more frequent cycle.
Appreciate it, Martha. So we will have extensive discussion on Title VI and civil rights, but I will be curious I'm interested in taking a look at your completed ADA self-evaluation plan required for Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act.
Yeah, okay. Happy to talk with you about it further. We've really, I think, dug in deep as an agency, not just within the MPO, but as an agency to, live into all of the requirements around inclusion. So it's been a pretty significant initiative of the agency over the last year. So
thanks, Martha. I've actually taken notice of the great job you have done. So thank you very much for the summary.
Well, thanks for that, Ivan. We've enjoyed the guidance you guys have given, so appreciate that.
Perfect. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Martha. And thank you, Chet. Sure. So moving forward, I'll hand this off to Renique Bishop, and she'll cover the UPWP and multimodal planning section.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Are we
Yes,
good?
we can.
Okay. Okay. So yes, like Rich said, my name is Ronique Bishop. I am helping the Virginia division with their with this certification review. I'm originally from the Pennsylvania division of Federal Highways. So I'm new to the Pennsylvania division as well. So it's my pleasure to join the federal review team and the MPO on this review. And I've enjoyed getting to know you guys and looking through the planning documents. As you know, the Unified Planning Work Program is one of the required documents as a recipient of federal funds, and the document outlines any actions or tasks that that the MPO and planning partners will take in order to achieve the region's goals and objectives. And a budget is also included as well to see how funds will be implemented to achieve those tasks. So I'm going to start with the UPWP and then move on to the multimodal planning part. And some of my questions have already been answered, which is great. That'll chop down on time. And wanted to start off with the document itself is very readable, very legible. I want to thank the MPO for taking our recommendations from the past certification review to improve the document. So I just wanted to commend the MPO on that. One of the questions that I wanted to start off with is how does the MPO monitor like the workload and the task priorities in the UPWP as far as like implementation goes? I know it's over, was it a two years, but I just wanted to get more insight on how the MPO monitors that.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Ronique. The work program, I appreciate the notice that it's simplified and readable. That was a supreme effort for all the staff to kind of redo that process, and it helps with our efficiency. I think in terms of the accountability and the work tracking of time, oddly enough, what Ms. Heater just mentioned in terms of our reporting processes, we do a monthly status report to our policy board, our elected officials, that includes expenditures for the month. So we do track through our time tracking process by work task. So if you look at the work program, say 7,300 is our long range transportation plan. Everybody is charging their time to specific work tasks and has been assigned those tasks as we develop the work program, so that we're able to go in and know on a biweekly basis where things stand, percentage of expenditures for each work task, and that in that manner we can track progress from month to month, and that's something that our elected officials look to see to make sure that we are on task and we're doing the work that we set out to do when the policy board adopted the work program. So that's an annual cycle. We redo our budgets every spring in advance of developing the new work program. So and it changes year to year depending on staff levels, kind of the cyclical MPO type of work. Do we have a long range plan in that year? Are we looking at a TIP update? So we assign tasks depending on what the workload is going to be, and then we're able to track it accordingly. So I guess the overall answer is through our established reporting methods, our monthly reports to our policy board, our quarterly reports to VDOT and DRPT, we're able to show expenditures by staff member on each item in the work program.
Okay, great. Just making another few more notes here. Okay, awesome. Okay, so you've kind of, talked about the expenditures. I guess a follow up to this question is, does the MPO sense that the majority of fiscal resources have been spent or are being spent sufficiently to carry out the work program, in your opinion?
That's a great question, and I appreciate the context given we're coming out of 18 to 24 months of uncertainty.
Yeah.
We had programmed in fiscal year 20 the addition of multiple new staff members, and that went into the development of the work program for fiscal year 21. Because of COVID and the shift to virtual meetings, and honestly the efficiency of our staff to work remotely and make things happen, we did not make those additional hires at that time. So we noticed that the budgets that were set for last year were not met in a number of instances. But we can attribute that directly to that we planned on hiring staff and weren't able to. So we still want, the plan is for this fiscal year to make those hires. And again, it's accounted for in our budgeting. So we think that things will even out this year, and we'll be able to do a lot more great work for the region. I mentioned earlier in the morning, hiring a public engagement coordinator. Some of those type of strategic hires are going to be big assists for all of the products and the plans and processes that we develop.
Okay, great. Moving up to, let's see. Okay, that was answered. Okay, so I just wanted to get a clarification on the performance measures that was mentioned in your UPWP. This could totally be just my understanding, so I would appreciate if you could just flesh it out for me. But does the MPO develop its own performance measures and targets, or does it adopt the already established state performance measures? Because I noticed that in the UPWP, you say that you work with OIP, VDOT, and DRPT to develop the performance-based planning and programming process, but I was a little bit unclear on the performance measures and targets part. Like, does the MPO have their own? Have they adopted their own? And is that what the partnership between the planning partnership is helping with, or if you could just clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is where we, I think everybody on the screen understands acronyms and what we're all talking about. But when the public is watching,
I'm sorry.
I think what we're doing is, I think we're talking about two different types of performance measures.
Okay.
We talked a little bit this morning about performance measures for a long range plan. That's one thing. And then we also talk about performance-based transportation planning, which is what's in the UPWP. And it's a little bit different. And if Greta Ryan is available, this is her baby. And I think she's best equipped to answer that question about the partnerships and the development of performance measures and who does what. Greta?
Yes, Chet, I am available. Can people hear me? I was taking your question at first having to do with the federal performance measures, which we do go along with VDOT and rely on them for a lot of the data related to these measures for our region. And then we will also evaluate them, take that information and evaluate that on our own and keep track of it. We then also do some other evaluations, which maybe just complement the performance measures, which are the travel time data that we get through a partnership with the Eastern Transportation Coalition. And VDOT also is a major player in that group. So a lot of our work is closely coordinated through VDOT and with them.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that explanation and the difference there. I really appreciate that. But yeah, you were right in the first part, the federal performance measures, but thank you for also mentioning the other performance measures that accompany that, as you mentioned. Okay, that's great. Let me see. Sorry, I'm going through. Okay, so another thing that I saw that that I am glad that the MPO is using is that in the UPWP is mentioned that the MPO has used visualization tools and story maps to explain the performance measures to the public and trends. So I kind of wanted to see what the feedback has been on that, and just more on how that was developed.
Yeah, I think that this is something that Greta can address, but I think in general, I mean, my observations are that story maps and dashboards are the thing that everybody looks for right now, and it really does help to tell a story that about how the region's performing that we can't do with a 200-page text document, and no one wants to see that anyway. So one of the things that we've done is that Greta's led is to develop a dashboard that indicates performance of the regional transportation network and how things have trended during COVID with work from home and change in commuting patterns and peak periods and bottlenecks and all those kinds of things. And that's really been useful, I think, not just for us and for our constituents, but for our local elected officials and staff as well, to see how the region as a whole is trending. The other thing we've done is to double down on story maps. The ArcGIS platform has been amazing to be able to visualize our data and essentially transform a stale report into something that is dynamic and interactive. And as we've gone through 5 phases of long-range plan development, we've used story maps on multiple occasions to communicate where things are for each phase, whether it's identifying problems or possible solutions or constrained project lists. It really has kind of leveled the playing field in terms of allowing people from all kinds of backgrounds to be engaged and understand better how we're doing with the plan development process and those kinds of things. And we also have used it. I see Phil on the line. We've used it for our bicycle pedestrian plan update. We've used it to work with stakeholder groups for specific types of projects. It's been a game changer in terms of our ability to relate and have the general public relate to us and understand what regional planning is.
Yeah, Chet, I just want to say that, yeah, we at the Federal Highway Virginia Division think that you've done an outstanding job with respect to the story maps. And thank you for your efforts in this particular area.
I appreciate that, Ivan. Thanks.
Awesome. That's great to hear. I just have one more question before we move on to multimodal planning. And I also opened the floor up to the federal review team if they had any follow-up questions themselves. But the last thing is going back to the development of the UPWP. How often do you coordinate data collection or data for like modeling or freight planning, congestion management? Can you kind of go into a little bit about that? I know you said that you coordinate with VDOT and use a lot of their data, but is there anything else additional that the MPO does that you haven't mentioned already?
Greta may want to expand on this a little bit in terms of her partnerships with some of the other groups on the East Coast. But one thing we do with VDOT and other partners is VDOT hosts a quarterly data meeting where everyone gets together and talks about best practices and learns about examples from other offices and jurisdictions and MPOs. And it's been a really good experience for us to be a part of that, to kind of stay up to speed on what the state's working on and how to be best engaged with that. I can speak personally. I've had the opportunity through that quarterly meeting and the relationships that we've developed to sit on some panels with VDOT, as well as other DOTs around up and down the East Coast to talk about some of the work that we've been doing. And it's really been, I've been appreciative of the opportunity to kind of tell our story in Richmond and kind of show that even with a small staff, a small but mighty staff, we can do a lot of great work as long as the data's there and we know how to use it. So I think we're a good case study if anybody out there wants to talk more about how to utilize data and make it useful for the whole region.
I'll jump in with the more of the precise timing. With VDOT, we do go to these quarterly meetings between OIP, VDOT, GRPT, and the MPOs. And those are very useful because they explain what they're looking at, what are they going to do with the data, what are the areas they're tracking, things like that. But then when it comes time for the actual performance measures, that's the point at which they're sharing the data with us and we work. And then I will usually break that down to look just at our area from that data. Otherwise, I'll use a lot of the INREX or the NPM RDS data annually to look at what's going on in the region. Or also we'll be using some of that data on our RSTP CMAC applications. So, we'll look at the data whenever in ad hoc instances when we need it. But that's the usual timeline for looking at it.
It's good.
Great, awesome. Does anybody else have any on the federal review team or even from anybody on this call that wanted to add to the UPWP discussion before moving on to multimodal planning?
I don't have anything to add. Great discussion. Great job. Appreciate it.
Veronique, I quickly wanted to just brag a little bit about our staff. This is
Of
the
course.
dashboard that we have developed to talk about some of the trends over the last few years. So it tracks VMT, distance traveled, as well as GRTC ridership. And it's sortable by jurisdiction, by week. So you can look at percent of people staying home. We also added a timeline. So you could say, May 15th, phase 1 reopening began for a lot of businesses and schools in the region. So you could see on May 15th, you see a spike as people went back to some more normalcy, previous normalcy, I guess. So it's just, it's a really good platform to just kind of use the data to tell the story about what's happening. So this is on our website if anybody wants to dig in after the fact and take a look.
Hey,
So,
Chet,
thanks.
this is great information, Chet. How far do you have to dig into the planned RVA to get to this?
So if you go to the transportation page, one of the things we've done right there on the front page of that is to provide some snapshots for some of the particular planning projects. So obviously at the top, we've got Connect RVA, but the dashboards are right here on the right side.
Right. So in the past, I would typically type Richmond Regional TPO, but now it just takes me to the planned RVA site as the initial site. And I think I have to dig through. I go to transportation and then get to this page. And that's right. So this is great information. Is it maybe a way to, pull and bring this information forward, or do you think that's the best approach in terms of exposure and availability for public consumption?
Well, and that's a great question. I mean, we certainly welcome feedback from this group. The position we've taken is that we all work for Plan RVA.
Okay.
Plan RVA is the organization that hosts the TPO. So that should be the landing site for everything, and then we go to transportation or emergency management or environment, depending on what the program is. So right now it's planrva.org, and we just do a / transportation, and you can get to everything. But if you think that's not accessible enough, we'd certainly welcome some feedback, and I'd love to see examples that if you have any from other places that provide that good resource. I mean, it's all technology. We can manipulate it to serve us to the best needs possible. So.
No, great information, great data. So the Plan RVA, is that the PDC, or what is Plan RVA is what organization?
Yes, Plan RVA is the rebranded PDC.
Okay.
So we don't say Richmond Regional Planning District Commission anymore. We say Plan RVA.
And I will add, if you type into your browser bar rrtpo.org, it will go directly to the TPO's homepage. So you don't have to navigate through the Plan RVA home site. We've set it up so that you can sort of shortcut it. So on all the outreach material for the TPO, we have rrtpo.org.
Okay, thank you.
That's awesome. Okay. Yeah, thank you for that illustration and that walkthrough. That was great. So we'll just move right into multimodal planning. So in this section, it's going to include freight, bicycle, pedestrian, non-motorized transportation, and how those areas are integrated into the MPO's planning process. So, and I apologize in advance if these questions are redundant, but I'm going to do my best to combine the questions and kind of have it be like follow-ups to the question, because a lot of these are related. So what I wanted to start off with is this question. Just a moment. So I just wanted to, for the MPO to describe how has staff identified the transportation planning link between freight and economic development? Because so in the regs, there's 10 planning factors. And so regarding freight, it talks about economic vitality, safety of all users, accessibility and connectivity of the system. So just kind of wanted to get more into how the MPO is addressing that. You guys have kind of already talked a little bit about that. And I guess a follow-up to this question to kind of help spur the conversation is, in one of the planning documents I read that the MPO has a freight and intermodal work group. So how, I kind of want to get to know how that group was created and their role, and see if that helps to start the conversation. If that's too broad, I can narrow it down, but if you can answer.
Sure. Yeah, this is Chet. I think that, I mean, I'm going to be brutally honest. Freight is a growth area for us. We're not doing a lot in that regard. We do have the work group that you mentioned, but they meet sporadically. And I think one of the big issues that I've noticed is we don't have as much access to good freight data as we do to other types. And I think we have, with the staff that we have, the size of our staff, if we can get access to more data, we can manipulate it in similar ways to what we've done with BMT and some of the other stuff that Greta was talking about. And that just hasn't it hasn't been at the top of our list for the past 2 years. I think everybody understands that it's a need. We certainly have, I could pull that back up. We have freight and economic development in terms of truck traffic and throughput and those types of things as performance measures to help rank and prioritize the projects in the long range plan. And so that does go into our calculations. And I think that we are actively working to improve our staff capacity to think more deliberately about freight in particular. We have increased our coordination with the Port of Virginia and the work that they're doing at the Richmond Marine Terminal. We've got finite focus on the Commerce Road Corridor stemming from a plan that was done a few years ago, and there have been subsequent work done building off of that in terms of getting containers off the river onto the highway network or onto the rail system and dispersing to either the inland port or other places. So we are doing our best to track that type of work. I think on the other side, I guess it's not a freight question, but we're working with DRPT and other stakeholders on some of the Amtrak work that's going on in the region in terms of looking at Staples Mill Station and some small area planning that's being done in that regard. But I think the freight question is a great one, and I'm not maybe I'll pause there and see what other questions you might have, and then it might make sense to pull in other staff.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see. Yeah, so I believe I read this in the long range plan, not really sure, but how the MPO mentioned that you guys are continuing to assess the security of the transportation system for freight providers. I know that that's one of or you listed it as the biggest security or the biggest security need for the state. Not sure how VDOT is approaching that, or if the MPO has any, I guess, involvement with that. But I think it's good that you guys are acknowledging the need and continuing to work towards it. So that's always good. Let me see if there's any other questions. If anybody else wants to chime in, feel free as I look through. So I do remember you mentioning that is the Amtrak project related to the rail communications and partnerships that you mentioned earlier. Is that kind of one and the same, or is it like multiple? I guess, am I making sense?
Yes, I know what you're saying, I think.
Okay.
So the Amtrak, the Staples Mill Amtrak station is a local project. Staples Mill receives most of the Amtrak traffic in Central Virginia. So we're one of the stakeholders in this group that's looking at improvements to the Staples Mill station and how to best accommodate that. I think the bigger picture, and Tiffany, it may be best to address this. There's been a lot of statewide and national attention to improving the Southeast corridor, and starting with the Long Bridge in DC and improving the capacity across the Potomac and unleashing some of the potential that we might see in the Southeast in terms of improving passenger rail up and down the East Coast.
So I guess regarding to the Staples Mill small area plan and the work, CRPC was involved with the initial work that kind of led to that plan. I think there are elements that incorporate our multimodal design guidelines as well. For us in Virginia, we are also starting up our work. There's a new Virginia Passenger Rail Authority that is taking over a lot of the passenger rail initiatives. So there's a lot of kind of fluctuation, at least on the rail side, in terms of roles and responsibilities between DRPT and VPRA. However, there is still a priority about the Northeast Corridor. I think there's also work being expanded in terms of Richmond to Valley. So there are rail initiatives, and of course there are outstanding kind of rail enhancement programs and so forth. But I think the focus has been more on station improvements. So not only here, but also with like Ettrick Station down in the Petersburg area.
Okay, great. That's great. And I think that's a good thing about multimodal planning is that it talks about different modes. I'm trying to see if there's anything relating to freight specifically, because I do have some questions about bike ped as well that you guys mentioned earlier, that you guys are working on that, and I commend you guys on the progress and all the work that you've pulled into that. Let's see. Okay, that was answered previously. Let me see. Okay, so I guess this kind of goes into the perhaps it goes into the freight and intermodal work group, but I was curious about the participation or the outreach to the freight community in the planning process. How has that been going in the past? Or I guess how I should phrase it is, how does the NPO anticipate on achieving that in the future as you guys attribute more attention to this over the next horizon years? If you guys wanted to touch base on that, I don't know if you guys have already met internally about it or been brainstorming ideas, but I just wanted to open the floor for you guys to discuss anything, any improvements to this area of freight before moving on to the bike ped conversation.
I think I understand the question. Are you asking about kind of where we hope to go next?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
That was the long version. I'm sorry.
Sure.
But
no,
yeah.
That's okay. I mean, my impression of freight, and I guess my experience is that it's a pretty specialized role, and it's something that that the TPO has had in the past in terms of staff capabilities. And obviously, I mean, to be blunt, we've lost those folks to state jobs or federal jobs, and we'd like to kind of strengthen our capabilities in that area again. And it's really a matter of finding the right folks that have an interest and are kind of the right mettle to take that on. I think that'll happen fairly quickly once we get this long range plan out of the way, and it's one of those areas. In addition to the bike ped work, the other stuff that I mentioned earlier that's coming up in the next year that we want to strengthen. So I think it starts with technical capabilities of staff, and then probably the logical next step would be to mobilize that work group again and see where we could be put to best use. We don't want to create work just to create work. So it's a combination of what we're required to do and what the needs are from our member jurisdictions. So it really helps to have that that kind of foundational conversation again, especially since it's been a year plus since we've had that talk. So I think that's the next step. Take it slow, figure out where the best use of our time is, and then take that first step.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That sounds good. And another thing that I wanted to ask or bring up is about travel demand modeling and any forecasting methods that the MPO uses. This is, incorporating all modes. So I was just wondering if the MPO manages that, or is that something that you use a consultant for, or if you partner with another agency or organization to develop those tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to say about 2 sentences, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sulabh Arial, who is equipped to answer everything else about the model. So we do have a combined Richmond Tri-Cities travel demand model. So both MPOs are included in that model. And I briefly touched on it earlier, and we'll talk about it again with the long range plan discussion. There's been a number of major improvements to that, to look at specific things like accessibility and other types of inputs to our long range plan. But Sulabh, do you want to go into a little bit more detail about what we're doing with the travel demand model right now?
Sure, thanks, Chet. So as Chet mentioned, Richmond and Tri-Cities both are in the same urbanized area. So it was pretty logical to have the same travel demand model, which covers both the Richmond and Tri-Cities MPO. So it covers the whole of Richmond region as well as the localities of the Tri-Cities MPO. The latest version was updated for a base year of 2017 and a future year of 2045, which we use for this long-range transportation plan. It's a 4-step model, unlike some of the MPOs outside Virginia who use activity-based model. Virginia doesn't have any activity-based model, so it's still a 4-step model. It has a transit component, obviously, as well as a heavy truck component. So it doesn't have, heavy truck is basically defined as freight above category 6 of FHWA categorization. So category 5 is basically medium trucks, and then category 6 to 13 is considered heavy truck. So we have a different heavy truck model. Category 5, which is the medium truck, is considered as autos because their traveling pattern is similar with the autos. So we have that. We have in the travel demand model specified some of the generators for freight traffic, which are called as the truck intensive areas. So these areas like the Port of Virginia, the Richmond International Airport, as well as some of our big industrial areas and warehousing, they get more trips generated based on that identification as a truck intensive area. So the model is developed by VDOT, but it is maintained by it's basically maintained by us, RRTPO, for both Richmond and Tri-Cities. So the modeling, when it was developed by VDOT, we had a committee which included the members of both Richmond and Tri-Cities MPO, as well as VDOT modeling staff. And based on our recommendation, it was built to the extent that what budget VDOT had to what we wanted the model to be. So a lot of new accommodations were added to this model, the 2017 version, than it previously existed. Then again, for the long range transportation plan, we also have a consultant contract in which we further enhance the model so that we can actually get some of the performance measures which we use to evaluate projects which come out from the travel demand model. Things like the person throughput and hours of delay, which directly don't come out from the travel demand model, and which we'll be discussing later on in the performance measures part of this this meeting today, as well as the accessibility model, which is kind of uses both the travel demand model output as well as an external software which is based on R. So it was used extensively in the long range transportation plan, including freight planning and scoring of the projects in the long range transportation plan.
And I guess one other note, Ronique, is that in addition to the travel demand model, we also now have a subscription to Replica, which is an additional analysis tool. I believe we're the first agency in Virginia to use it, but it's a composite of lots of other data sources, which helps us to kind of, even though we don't have an activity-based model, it gives us insights into what we would have if we had an activity-based model. So including mobile location data, credit transactions, census data, land use data, and other types of kind of ground truth information. So we're able to use that as another tool to analyze some of the trends that we're seeing. And we're looking forward to digging into that more over the next year as we start thinking about scenario planning. So that's kind of the next step.
Okay, great. That's awesome. So moving into more so like the bike ped side. Let's see. So in one of the planning documents, I can't recall which one, but it mentioned a Vision Zero regional action plan. So I was curious about the progress on that, if any, or any updates to the plan. In the document, I believe that progress is still ongoing on the Vision Zero action plan, but I thought that was pretty unique to include. So I just wanted to ask about that.
Sure. I think that you're correct. It is ongoing, although we are making great progress. Part of the city of Richmond is the leader in Vision Zero. They're all in 100% and kind of started the discussion at the regional level, at the TPO level about, we should think about doing a regional plan. And it's taken some work and some understanding, but we have, I'll say, broad buy-in from most of our jurisdictions, and they serve on a working group, a task force, whatever you want to call it, to think about a regional action plan for Vision Zero. That's involved some education and some understanding that we're not all urbanized, we're not all experiencing the same type of geography and land use. But that action plan is being developed right now. We're being graciously led by a group from VDOT as well as I believe VHB to look at development of a high entry network and the different types of things that would be useful to the broad swath of urbanization in our region, so that the data that comes out of this plan can be helpful to everybody. So they meet, the work group meets, I'll say, every other month. So it's an ongoing process to develop the plan. But I think it's, this is the first time. It hasn't been done in the region before. So I think we're all excited about what the outcomes are going to show. And I hope the utility of it will be readily available to the local jurisdiction staff.
Awesome, great. Let's see. Okay, so the bike plan, the bike pedestrian plan itself. I wanted to ask if the NPO can talk briefly about the implementation process for those recommendations that's in there, or any process for prioritizing any projects, if you can speak a little bit on that.
Sure. I think that, as I mentioned, the bike ped plan is being developed kind of concurrently now with the long range plan. But a lot of the background work is complete. I see Barb has turned her camera on, and I actually, Barb, if you want to talk a little bit about prioritization, you and Phil, and then I could talk about implementation and the next steps.
Okay, thank you. Yes, as you noted, we are in the process, a concurrent process with the long range transportation plan, updating our 2004 bike ped plan. And we started this well over a year ago with a steering committee made up of our locality and partner agencies, as well as a lot of advocacy groups that are represented. Phil is really going to be the expert on this, so I'll turn it over to him if need be, if you need more detail. But we did get to the point where, in looking at prioritization and doing a very thorough inventory of the facilities that we currently have in the region and how we can possibly network together to create a regional system, all of those projects went into consideration in the constrained plan, and all of them are included in the constrained plan, except for, I think there's one maybe that's in the vision plan, several in the vision plan, because there's no known route for those that are in the vision plan. But the key feature is the Fall Line Trail, which is proposed the north-south complement to the Virginia Capitol Trail. We're building the whole connected system on the basis of that very strong proposal to extend from Ashland to Petersburg, which has been fully supported by VDOT and lots of partner agencies in our localities. So I'm going to let, if Phil wants to, he's also got an active transportation work group that participates through our office and our bike ped planning as well, if you needed to touch on that.
This is Phil Riggin. I just wanted to add, we've been analyzing through this bicycle and pedestrian plan and all the data we've collected. We've had several meetings with each of the localities in the region, and we've had a steering committee working through this plan, but we've developed some tools, story maps, a variety of ways to analyze the data we've collected. But one of those is the level of stress in the region on the roadways, trying to perhaps recommend in an effort to, I guess, analyze the priority corridors, recommend areas that are already lower stress, that provide connections for people through existing infrastructure, or trying to connect some of that existing infrastructure with other ways to connect the gaps in between the existing infrastructure. So yes, we've I have to say it's been more complicated because of the pandemic and all that, but using some of the story maps and the data as part of the lead in our presentations and our online homework, essentially, it's assignments we've given to our steering committee and the regional partners. So but yeah, I could answer any other questions, hopefully, that you might have.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Barb. I think the other thing to add is you were asking about implementation. When we talked with Ryan earlier about the scoring process and prioritization of transit, it's a similar process for bike ped projects. And we could talk about that in the long range plan discussion later, but we do have minimum thresholds for different types of modes. in terms of what's deemed a regional project and what should be considered for the long range plan and what's a local programmatic. So the same thing applies for bike ped improvements, but they would be put through the same 15 performance measures that we briefly discussed earlier, and would be considered for implementation in terms of their benefit, their costs, and the overall benefits to the region.
Yep, sounds good. Sounds good. Definitely look forward to the discussion later on that. So we can definitely save it for then. See if there's anything. Is there anything else? I don't think I have anything else. Does anybody else on the federal review team have a question that they want to ask regarding multimodal planning? I know it kind of also integrates with other areas as well. So just wanted to open the floor to anybody else who wanted to speak.
Hey, Ronique, Ivan. Hey, thanks for carrying the discussion. I don't think I have anything else to add. Thank you for the conversation. Very interesting discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Chet.
This is Richard. Likewise, I think the questions I had were all answered. Thank you, Chen. Thank you, Ronique.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. I believe we are a little bit ahead of schedule, which is always nice. Richard, I'll hang it over to you, and thank you everyone for the discussion and answering my questions. This was good. This was great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ronique. Yeah, it looks like we're a little bit ahead in schedule, but we can go ahead and actually dismiss ourselves and take a lunch break. With that said, we can reconvene about at 1:10, start logging back in. And then at 1:15, we'll start back on our next section. Will be planning factors, long range transportation plan, the TIP, and the performance measures.
Sounds good. We'll be here.
That's good. And again, if everybody doesn't mind logging out, that way Chet can restart the meeting when we start up again for recording purposes.